The torrential rain of an October evening in Boston seemed to want to wash the world clean, but it couldn't wash away the fatigue that had steeped every fiber of Amelia's muscles. The 14-hour flight from Tokyo to Logan International Airport was the final leg of a 2-week business marathon. Meetings, presentations, endless nights, working on her laptop. It had all paid off. 3 lucrative contracts were nestled in her briefcase, a resounding victory that could take her career to a new level. But now all Amelia craved was to collapse into her own bed in her own house, a sanctuary she had poured her sweat tears and every saved dollar into creating. The taxi glided over the familiar wet streets. As the car turned into the oak-lined Brookline neighborhood, Amelia let out a sigh of relief. There it was, her Tudor-style house, an antique gem she had fallen in love with at first sight. She paid the driver and dragged her heavy suitcase up the 3 stone steps. Something was wrong. The porch light, which she had programmed to turn on automatically at dusk, was dark. A shiver ran down her spine, not entirely from the Boston cold. She dismissed the feeling of unease, assuming it was a temporary power outage. She inserted her key into the lock. It didn't fit. Amelia frowned, pulled the key out, and tried again. Still no luck. She turned on her phone's flashlight and aimed it at the lock. It wasn't her lock. The antique brass lock she loved was gone, replaced by a shiny, modern, and unfamiliar stainless steel one. Confusion quickly turned to alarm. Had there been a break-in? Had her parents changed the lock for some safety reason? She rang the doorbell. The chime echoed and then fell silent in the dark house with no response. Panicked, she quickly pulled out her phone and dialed her mother's number. Voicemail. She called her father. "Amy?" Her father's voice, Richard's, came through the line, unusually cheerful. "You're back. How was the trip?" "Dad." "I'm at the house," she said, trying to keep her voice from trembling. "I can't get in. The lock has been changed. What's going on?" A long pause stretched on the other end of the line. It wasn't the silence of surprise, but the silence of someone choosing their words. "Oh, well, you should come over to our place. We need to talk." His loaded tone made the blood in her veins run cold. She got back into the waiting taxi and gave her parents' address in Newton, a 15-minute drive away. When Amelia walked into the living room, the scene before her was surreal. Her younger brother Leo was lounging on the sofa, scrolling through his phone with a self-satisfied smirk. Her mother was bustling in the kitchen, deliberately avoiding her gaze. Her father sat in his familiar leather armchair, his expression unnervingly calm. "What is going on?" Amelia asked, directly, her voice as taut as a violin string. "Why was the lock on my house changed?" Leo looked up, the smirk on his face widening. "Check this out," he said, turning his phone screen towards her. Photos flashed by Leo stretched out on a pristine white sand beach, sipping a cocktail by an infinity pool and posing in front of a luxurious overwater villa. "Bora Bora baby," he boasted. 5-star all the way. Amelia stared at the images, her mind reeling. How could you afford this? I thought you said you couldn't get a loan." Her father muted the television and leaned forward. "We found another solution," he said, his tone as casual as if he were discussing the weather. "We sold your house." The 2 words, "sold your house," hit Amelia like a physical blow. Her knees went weak, and she had to grab the back of a chair to keep from collapsing. What did you say?" "We sold your house," he repeated, his voice firmer this time. "Got a good price for it, too. A cash buyer, closed in 10 days. Her mother finally emerged from the kitchen, wringing her hands nervously. Leo really needed this trip, Amelia. He was in a bad place after Tiffany broke up with him. You know how sensitive he is. Amelia struggled to breathe, to piece together the fragments of logic in her head. "You sold my house without my permission. That's illegal. How could you possibly do that?" Her father waved a dismissive hand. "We had your key. We were able to get into your office for the paperwork. The rest was just details." "Details?" Her voice rose with disbelief. "You mean forgery?" Leo chimed in without a shred of remorse. "The resort was amazing. Private butler, unlimited spa treatments, and underwater restaurant. I needed that, Amelia. You have no idea how hard that breakup was on me. Rage and utter disbelief warred within Amelia, but with a monumental effort she forced herself to remain outwardly calm. So you committed fraud, sold my house without my knowledge, and used the money for a luxury vacation. Her mother's face grew defensive. Not all of it went to the vacation. We needed a new car too, and Leo deserves something nice after everything he's been through. Everything he's been through, she repeated, her voice dripping with sarcasm. A 3-month relationship ending is grounds for stealing my house. The house I worked 3 jobs to save up for, the house I spent 2 years renovating. Her father's face hardened. Don't be so dramatic. You can always buy another house. You're doing well at your job. Besides, we're your parents. We know what's best. What's best? You think stealing from your own daughter is what's best. We didn't steal, her father said flatly. We reallocated family resources to where they were needed most. Leo needed to heal. You were too attached to that house anyway. Too attached. It was my home. Richard leaned back in his chair, a smirk forming on his lips. Well, not anymore. Your house paid for their fun. He gestured with his head toward Leo, who was still absorbed in his vacation photos. In that instant, something inside Amelia shifted. The shock and rage gave way to an eerie calm. She felt the corners of her mouth twitch into a smile. Her father's smirk faltered. What's so funny? He snapped. Amelia held the smile but said nothing. Instead, she picked up her suitcase and walked toward the door. Where are you going? Her mother called after her. To make a few phone calls, she replied, her voice unnervingly steady. Have a good evening. As she closed the door behind her, she could hear Leo ask, What's her problem? She can just buy another house. They had no idea that their actions had set in motion a chain of events that would change their family forever. And not in the way they imagined. The tears finally came mingling with the rain streaks on the taxi window. Amelia drove aimlessly through the neon-drenched streets of Boston, the image of her father's smirk and Leo's smugness burning in her mind. The initial rage had subsided, replaced by a cold, sharp pain, the brutal truth that the people she called family were the ones who had stabbed her in the back. But through the fog of her grief, a steel-like resolve was being forged. Her smile as she left wasn't one of surrender. It was a declaration of war. The only destination that came to mind was the modern apartment complex in the seaport where Chloe, her best friend, lived. Chloe was the sister Amelia never had, but always needed. They had weathered 4 years of college together, witnessing the highs and lows of each other's careers and love lives. The light in Chloe's apartment was still on, even though it was well past midnight. She knocked a frantic rhythm on the door. Seconds later, it swung open. Chloe, in a pair of avocado print pajamas, looked at her with eyes that went from sleepy to wide awake with concern. Amelia? Oh my God, what happened? Chloe pulled her inside, taking her soaking coat. You look like you've seen a ghost. The moment the door closed, the wall of composure Amelia had painstakingly constructed crumbled. She sank onto Chloe's linen sofa, and the horrific truth tumbled out between choked sobs. She recounted everything: the successful business trip, the changed lock, the cold confrontation, and her family's cruel confession. Chloe listened, the disbelief on her face slowly morphing into righteous fury. They sold your house, without your consent, to send your brother on vacation. Her voice rose with each question. That's not just immoral, Amelia. That's a crime. We need to call the police, right? Wait, Amelia interrupted, taking a deep, steadying breath. There's something else, Chloe. Something about the house they don't know. Chloe sat down beside her, her fine eyebrows knitted together. What do you mean? Amelia's mind drifted to her grandmother Eleanor, the one person in her family who had truly seen and valued her. While her parents poured their attention and resources into Leo, Eleanor had invested in her not with material things, but with an unwavering belief in her potential. You remember my grandmother? Amelia asked. Chloe nodded. Of course. She was amazing, always had cookies when we visited in high school, and never forgot to ask about my art projects. She was the only one who ever put me first, Amelia said quietly. The only one who recognized how my parents treated me compared to Leo. In her mind, she could see Eleanor tending her rose garden, dispensing wise advice, along with freshly picked tomatoes. Family is supposed to lift you up, Amy, she used to say, not weigh you down. Remember, you are worthy of a love that comes without conditions. 3 years before Amelia bought the house, Eleanor had passed away peacefully. What very few people knew was that before she died, she had set up a private trust with Amelia as the sole beneficiary. She had carefully kept it a secret from her son Amelia's father, who had a history of borrowing large sums of money from her and never paying them back. The house, Amelia explained to Chloe, wasn't technically mine. At least not in the way they think. Chloe looked confused. What are you talking about? I was the named owner, yes, but I was actually the trustee of my grandmother's estate. The house was purchased through a trust she established before she died. Wait, Chloe said, processing the information. So the house belongs to a trust, not directly to you? Amelia nodded. Exactly. My grandmother knew what my father was like. She knew he had taken advantage of her financially in the past, so she created a trust with very specific clauses. Chloe's eyes widened. So by selling your house, they violated the terms of the trust? Yes, Amelia confirmed. And there's more. I suspected something was off. My dad was asking too many questions about the house's value before I left. Leo was a little too interested in how much equity I'd built up. What did you do? Chloe asked, her voice full of anticipation. I installed security cameras before I left. Hidden ones connected to cloud storage. I have video evidence of them entering my house, going through my papers, meeting with a realtor, and forging my signature on documents. Chloe stared at her aghast. You knew they would do this. Amelia let out a heavy sigh. I hoped they wouldn't, but living with them for 18 years taught me to prepare for the worst. My grandmother taught me that too, in her own way. She always said trust had to be earned, not given automatically, even with family. Chloe reached for her phone. We need to call the police. This is clear-cut fraud. Amelia placed a hand on hers. Not yet. I need to talk to my grandmother's lawyer first. There's a process. The trust has specific protocols for handling breaches. But Amelia, they sold your house. Where are you going to live? What about all your things? Caught up in the betrayal. Amelia hadn't fully considered these practicalities. I don't know, she admitted. I assume they packed my things up. Or maybe they're still in the house. The new owners probably haven't moved in yet. Chloe squeezed her hand. You're staying here until we get this sorted. And we will get it sorted. Your family is not getting away with this. As the initial shock began to wear off, a cold determination replaced it. Her grandmother had protected her even from beyond the grave, preparing for a betrayal she had perhaps sensed was coming. She would not let her down. Tomorrow, she said, her voice steady for the first time since the discovery, I'm contacting Mr. Harrison, my grandmother's lawyer. He has all the trust documents. And then we're going to make a plan. Chloe nodded, her face alight with fierce loyalty. Whatever you need, I'm here. They have no idea what they've done. Do they? No, Amelia replied, a grim smile touching her lips. They think they just sold a house. They don't realize they just sold their own futures. Later that night, curled up in Chloe's guest room, exhausted, but finally drifting off to sleep, Amelia felt her grandmother's presence more strongly than ever. I'm going to make it right, Grandma, she whispered into the darkness. I promise. The next morning, Amelia woke with the first light of dawn. The storm from the night before had passed, leaving behind a crisp, clear Boston sky. For the first time in hours, her mind wasn't in turmoil. Instead, it felt like a well-oiled machine ready for action. The pain was still there, a low burn, but it was now encased in a layer of icy resolve. Chloe had already called in sick to work. Today is War Room Day, she announced while flipping blueberry pancakes. The comforting smell of coffee and baked goods filled the apartment, a bizarrely normal counterpoint to the storm. Over the kitchen table, they mapped out their first steps. Amelia's top priority was to meet with Mr. Harrison, the elderly lawyer who had managed her grandmother's estate and been her confidant for decades. His office opened at 9. At 9:01, Amelia was dialing his number. "Amelia," Mr. Harrison greeted her, his voice warm but laced with concern. "I was just about to call you. I've received some unusual paperwork regarding the trust property. Are you selling the house?" "No, Mr. Harrison," Amelia replied, her voice firm. "I'm not, but my parents and brother forged my signature and sold it without my knowledge while I was on a business trip." A sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line told her he understood the gravity of the situation. "That is a very serious allegation, and unfortunately it aligns with what I'm seeing in these documents. Can you come to my office today?" 2 hours later, Amelia and Chloe sat across from Mr. Harrison in his downtown office. The room was tastefully appointed with dark mahogany floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and the faint smell of leather. At 65, with a full head of silver hair and sharp blue eyes, Mr. Harrison exuded the quiet authority of a man who had spent a lifetime winning in courtrooms. "First," he said, placing a file on the polished desk, "let me assure you that this sale is not valid. As the trustee, you are the only one authorized to sell trust assets. Any transfer without your legal signature is fraudulent." "Can we reverse it?" Amelia asked, a flicker of hope igniting. "Yes, but it will take time. The innocent buyers have rights as well, and they are likely completely unaware of the fraud. We will need to file a police report as forgery is a criminal offense." Amelia nodded, feeling a mix of relief and dread. "And what about my grandmother's clause about family members attempting to take from the trust?" Mr. Harrison's expression grew stern. "That clause is quite clear. According to the trust documents, any family member who attempts to misappropriate or convert trust assets for their own benefit is immediately disinherited from any and all claims to any inheritance or benefit from the trust. Based on what you've told me, your parents and brother have triggered that clause." Chloe leaned forward. "What does that mean, sir?" "It means," Mr. Harrison explained, "they are now cut off from any future distributions from the trust. And this trust contained more than just the house." This was entirely new information for Amelia. "What do you mean?" "Your grandmother was a rather shrewd investor. The house was purchased with only a portion of the trust's assets. There are additional funds that were intended to be distributed on your 35th birthday, with smaller portions designated for your parents and brother provided they respected the terms of the trust." Amelia's heart sank. "So they've lost their inheritance as well, not just stolen my house." "I'm afraid so," Mr. Harrison confirmed. "Your grandmother foresaw that something like this might happen. She had experienced similar behavior from your father while she was alive." Amelia suddenly recalled her grandmother's warnings about her father's sense of entitlement, about how he had borrowed money from her time and again, always with reasons not to pay it back, about how he had once tried to convince her to remortgage her own home to fund one of his failed business ventures. "What do we do now?" she asked. Mr. Harrison laid out a comprehensive plan. "First, we will file a police report for forgery and fraud. Then we will contact the title company and the new owners of the home to explain the situation. Finally, we will invoke the trust clause and formally document your family's breach. This process will take time," he cautioned, "and it will not be pleasant. Are you prepared for that?" Amelia thought of her parents' smirking faces, of Leo's casual disregard for her years of hard work. She looked the lawyer straight in the eye. The image of her grandmother Eleanor clear in her mind, strong, resolute, and always on the side of what was right. "I'm ready," she replied, her voice devoid of hesitation. Stepping out of the office building, the cold Boston air didn't seem so biting anymore. It felt crisp and clear, just like the path ahead of her. Chloe linked her arm through hers. "Your grandmother was one hell of a strategist," she said with admiration. Amelia nodded, a sad but proud smile on her face. "She didn't just leave me a house. She left me a fortress, and now it's time for me to use it to defend her legacy." They didn't know it, but the legal battle had only just begun. But for the first time since her return, Amelia didn't feel alone. She had Chloe by her side, the law on her side, and most importantly, the wisdom and foresight of a woman who had loved her unconditionally, who had armed her for a fight she knew she would one day have to face. The next step in Mr. Harrison's plan was one of the most awkward, contacting the people who had bought Amelia's house. Through his connections, he quickly identified them as the Millers, a young couple who had just moved to Boston from California for new jobs. They, like Amelia years before, had been charmed by the home's historic character and the quiet neighborhood. With Mr. Harrison and Chloe present for moral support, Amelia made the call. She felt her heart pound as the phone rang, a strange sense of guilt creeping in, even though she had done nothing wrong. A cheerful young woman's voice answered. "Hello, Miller residence. Hello, Mrs. Miller." Amelia began, trying to keep her voice calm and professional. "My name is Amelia Collins. I was the previous owner of the house at 12 Oak Street." "Oh, hi," Mrs. Miller replied, the warmth in her voice making Amelia feel even worse. "We absolutely love the house. It's perfect. Thank you so much for selling it." Though we were a little surprised how quickly everything happened. Amelia took a deep breath. "Actually, that's why I'm calling. There has been a very serious mistake. I'm afraid the sale of that house was not legal." Silence hung on the other end of the line. Amelia could hear Mrs. Miller call out to her husband, her voice now stripped of its cheerfulness. A few seconds later, a man's voice came on, more cautious. "This is Mark Miller." "What do you mean the sale wasn't legal?" Amelia, coached by Mr. Harrison, briefly explained the situation, that she had been out of the country on business, that her family had sold the home without her consent by forging her signature. She could hear shocked and confused whispers on the other end. We had no idea," Mrs. Miller finally said, her voice trembling. "Your representatives, your parents, they said you had to relocate suddenly for work. We never met you in person. We thought everything was completely legitimate. We've already started renovating the kitchen." "This is not your fault," Amelia quickly reassured them. "You are victims in this, just as I am. My lawyer will be working with you to make this right." Mr. Harrison then spoke with them, explaining the legalities, that the sales contract was void due to fraud, and that they would be fully compensated for any expenses incurred, including their down payment, renovation costs, and other inconveniences. The Millers, though shocked and disappointed, were cooperative. They promised to provide copies of all the documents and communications they had received from Amelia's representatives. The call ended, leaving Amelia feeling drained. Shattering a young couple's dream was a burden she had never wanted. "You handled that so well," Chloe said, giving her shoulder a squeeze. They needed to know the truth. The next stop was the police station. At the Brookline precinct, they met with Detective Ramirez, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, with sharp eyes that seemed to have seen everything. She listened to Amelia's story, carefully taking meticulous notes and never interrupting. When Amelia finished, she asked to see the evidence. Amelia handed her the tablet open to the cloud-stored video files. Detective Ramirez reviewed each clip with an impassive expression, but Amelia could see a slight tightening of her jaw. The first clip showed her father and Leo rummaging through her office. "Here it is." Richard's voice came from the tablet's speaker. "The mortgage file. The house is worth at least $850,000. More than enough for what we need." Leo's excited voice replied, "Can we really do this? Is it going to be okay?" Her father's response sent a chill down Amelia's spine. "Trust me, she'll never know until it's too late. And by then, what can she do?" The next clip, perhaps the most damning, showed her mother at the dining table, painstakingly practicing Amelia's signature on a piece of scrap paper. Her father stood over her, directing, "Make the A a little more looped. She has a little hook on the end of her S." "This is a pretty clear-cut case of fraud and forgery," Detective Ramirez said after she finished, watching her voice dry. "We'll need to take statements from the buyers and the real estate agent involved, but you have very strong evidence here." As they were leaving the station, Amelia received a call from an unknown number. It was her cousin, David, the son of her father's sister. David was the one relative with whom she had maintained a close relationship. He had always seen through his uncle's favoritism and was often the only one who checked in on her with genuine concern. "Amelia, what is going on?" David's voice was frantic. "Uncle Richard just called my dad in a panic, saying you're trying to get them arrested." Amelia explained the whole story to David. He listened in silence, punctuated only by occasional gasps of disbelief. "I'm not surprised," he admitted after she was done. "But even for them, this is extreme. Did you know they also bought a new SUV with the money and Leo has been plastering his trip all over social media?" This new information only hardened her resolve. Through David, she learned the full extent of their betrayal. The house had sold for $870,000. Leo's Bora Bora trip had cost nearly $150,000, including first-class airfare and the overwater villa. Her parents had purchased a brand-new Lincoln Navigator for $90,000. The remaining money was sitting in a joint account they had opened, and it was being spent rapidly on other luxuries. "There's something else you should know," David added, his voice hesitant. "This isn't the first time they tried to get at Grandma's money. About a year after she passed, Uncle Richard came to my dad about contesting the will. He was convinced there was more money somewhere that you were hiding." This truth, while painful, didn't surprise her. It only confirmed what she already knew about her family's character and reinforced her determination to hold them accountable. The pieces were falling into place. This wasn't a spontaneous act. It was the culmination of years of greed and entitlement masked under the guise of family love. The battle was just beginning, but the battle lines were clearly drawn, and Amelia, armed with evidence, the support of her friends, and the unyielding legacy of her grandmother, was ready to fight. In the days that followed, Chloe's apartment became a command center. The coffee table was swamped with legal documents, bank statements, and hastily scribbled notes. Amelia and Chloe, with remote guidance from Mr. Harrison, meticulously organized every piece of evidence. They compiled a complete dossier, the trust documents, the video evidence, the statement from the Millers, and the information from David about her family's lavish spending. Each piece of paper was a brick in the wall of justice Amelia was building. In the midst of this, Mr. Harrison prepared the formal legal notices invoking the disinheritance clause in Eleanor's trust. The documents, cold and irrefutable, stated that Richard Collins, his wife, and their son Leo Collins, by their fraudulent actions, had permanently forfeited all rights to the trust's assets. "We should deliver these in person," Amelia decided one evening, looking out at the glittering Boston skyline from Chloe's apartment window. "I want to see their faces when they realize what they've done." Chloe squeezed her hand. "Are you sure that's going to be intense?" "I'm sure," Amelia replied, her voice resolute. "But I don't want to do it at their house where they have the home field advantage. I want neutral ground, with witnesses." After some discussion, they devised a bold plan. Amelia would invite her parents and brother along with other members of the extended family to a dinner at a private room in an upscale restaurant. There, with relatives who had witnessed the unfair dynamic for years as witnesses, she would reveal the truth and present the legal consequences of their actions. David helped arrange the gathering, telling Amelia's parents that she wanted to clear the air about recent events. They agreed immediately, likely thinking Amelia had come to terms with their betrayal, or perhaps even that she was going to apologize for overreacting. The night before the confrontation, Amelia sat alone in Chloe's living room, staring at an old photo of her and her grandmother in the rose garden. "I wish you were here," she whispered. "But in a way you are. You prepared for this, didn't you? You knew they might do something like this." In the photograph, Eleanor's eyes twinkled with the wisdom of someone who had seen through all pretense, but still chose kindness when possible and set boundaries when necessary. Amelia would need both tomorrow. "I will make you proud," she promised the picture, not with vengeance, but with justice. The private dining room at the Chart House restaurant offered a stunning view of Boston Harbor. Amelia had arrived early with Chloe and David to ensure everything was ready. Mr. Harrison would arrive just before the confrontation, along with Detective Ramirez, who had agreed to be present in an unofficial capacity. Family members started arriving at 6:30. Aunt Elaine and Uncle Thomas, her father's sister and her husband. Her cousin Patricia and her husband Mark. Uncle Samuel, her mother's brother, and his wife Catherine. All people who had witnessed their family's dynamics for years, who had seen the preferential treatment Leo received but had never intervened. Her parents and Leo arrived last 15 minutes late. Her mother looked nervous, fiddling with a new designer handbag likely purchased with the proceeds from her house. Her father appeared confident, even smug, as if this dinner were a mere formality before Amelia accepted the new reality. Leo was engrossed in his phone, probably still posting pictures from his ill-gotten vacation. Amelia. Her father greeted her with forced cheerfulness. It's good to see you've calmed down. A family dinner is a good idea. Amelia maintained a neutral expression. Thank you all for coming. Please enjoy the meal first. We can talk after dinner. Throughout the meal, the conversation remained superficial. The weather, local sports teams, and upcoming family wedding. Her parents seemed to relax as the dinner progressed without incident. Leo even boasted about his trip, describing in detail the underwater restaurant and the private butler service, oblivious to the inappropriateness of flaunting his stolen luxury. The snorkeling was unbelievable, he gushed. You could see manta rays right from the deck of our overwater villa. Worth every penny. Every one of my pennies, Amelia thought, but said nothing. As dessert was being served, Mr. Harrison arrived, followed by Detective Ramirez. Amelia introduced them simply as my guests and watched as her father's expression shifted from confusion to alarm. Before we continue, Amelia said, standing to address the assembled family, I'd like to explain why I've asked you all here tonight. The room fell silent, all eyes on her. As some of you know, while I was on a business trip in Tokyo, my house was sold without my knowledge or consent. The proceeds were used to fund Leo's vacation to Bora Bora, a new car for my parents, and various other purchases. Her father interrupted, his voice sharp. Amelia, this is not the place to air family disagreements. We've discussed this. No, Dad, we haven't. You informed me of what you had done. There was no discussion. She turned to address the whole family. What you may not know is how this sale was accomplished. I have evidence that I'd like to share. Before her father could object further, Amelia nodded to Chloe, who had connected her laptop to the room's projector. The screen lit up with footage from her hidden security cameras. The room was dead silent. Her relatives watched in stunned disbelief. Her mother's face turned pale. Her father's jaw clenched. Turn it off, he ordered. This is a private family matter. Fraud is not a private matter, Dad. It's a criminal offense. Amelia gestured to Detective Ramirez. This is Detective Ramirez from the Brookline Police Department. She is investigating the fraudulent sale of my home. Her father's confidence began to crack. This is ridiculous. We're your parents. We had every right. No, Amelia said firmly. You didn't. And there's something else you should know about that house. She nodded to Mr. Harrison, who stepped forward, and the dinner of judgment truly began. I am Theodore Harrison, an attorney. Mr. Harrison introduced himself, his voice deep and authoritative, resonating through the silent room. I represented Eleanor Collins, Amelia's grandmother, and I am the administrator of her trust. Amelia's father's expression shifted from anger to confusion. What trust? What does my mother have to do with this? Mr. Harrison continued, his tone as even and professional as a legal brief. The house was not owned directly by Amelia. It was purchased through a trust established by Mrs. Collins before her death. Amelia is the trustee and primary beneficiary of that trust. Amelia watched as dawning comprehension spread across her father's face. His arrogance was melting away, revealing a core of confusion and fear. Leo looked completely bewildered, glancing back and forth between his father and Mr. Harrison. What does that mean? Leo asked, his voice losing its usual swagger. It means, Amelia explained, her own voice cold as ice, that the house was never mine to sell. It belonged to Grandma's trust. And more importantly, she included a very specific clause in her trust regarding family members who might try to take advantage of it. Mr. Harrison took several documents from his briefcase and laid them on the table. The room's lights glinted off the legal seal. The Eleanor Collins Trust explicitly states, he read aloud, each word a hammer blow, that any family member who attempts to misappropriate, convert, or otherwise interfere with the assets of the trust shall be immediately and irrevocably disinherited from any and all distribution from the trust. Amelia's mother gasped. What does that mean? Richard, she asked her husband, her voice trembling. Mr. Harrison answered before her father could. It means by fraudulently selling a trust asset, you, your wife, and your son have forfeited any inheritance under the trust. This includes a scheduled distribution that was to take place on Amelia's 35th birthday. What distribution? Her father demanded, panic creeping into his voice. What are you talking about? Your mother was a wise investor, Mr. Collins, Mr. Harrison explained. The house represented only a portion of the trust's assets. There were additional funds to be distributed to family members, including significant sums for you and your son, provided you honored the terms of the trust. The color drained from her father's face. How much? He asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. $500,000 each, Mr. Harrison replied, plus continued use of the vacation cabin in the Berkshires, which is also part of the trust. All of which you have now forfeited. The room held its breath. The hum of the ventilation system suddenly seemed deafening. Leo shot to his feet. This isn't fair. We didn't know about any trust. Ignorance of the trust is not a defense for fraud, Mr. Harrison countered calmly. Illegally selling a trust asset and forging the trustee's signature are still criminal acts. The assembled relatives were watching the scene unfold with expressions ranging from shock to horror. Aunt Elaine had a hand over her mouth. Uncle Samuel was shaking his head in disbelief. You can't do this, her father said, his voice no longer confident but pleading. She was my mother. That money should have been mine in the first place. Your mother disagreed, Mr. Harrison replied simply, and she had her reasons, which unfortunately these events have authenticated. Amelia's mother turned on her husband, her voice trembling with anger and fear. You said this would be simple. You said there would be no consequences. Now we've lost everything. Leo turned on them both. This is your fault. You said she'd never find out. You said the house was legally hers to sell. Watching them turn on each other, Amelia felt no triumph, only a profound sadness. This was her family. The people who were supposed to protect and support her now exposed in their greed and deception. Detective Ramirez stepped forward, her presence instantly quelling the argument. Mr. and Mrs. Collins, Leo Collins, I need you to come to the station to provide a statement regarding the allegations of fraud and forgery. Are we being arrested? Her mother asked, panic evident in her voice. Not at this time, Detective Ramirez replied, but this is a serious criminal matter that requires a formal investigation. Her father made one last desperate attempt. He turned to Amelia, his eyes now stripped of their contempt and filled only with raw desperation. Amelia, you can't do this to your family. We raised you. We gave you a home. You owe us. The room fell silent again, all eyes on Amelia waiting for her response. She took a deep breath, steadying herself before she spoke, her voice clear and firm. I owed you respect and I gave it, even when you didn't respect me. I owed you gratitude for the basic parental duties you fulfilled, and I gave that too. But I never owed you my home, my financial security, or my future, and I certainly never owed you the right to commit crimes in my name. She turned to her relatives. I didn't bring you here to seek sympathy or to have you pick sides. I brought you here as witnesses to the truth, so there could be no misrepresentation of what happened. This was not a misunderstanding or a family disagreement. This was fraud, forgery, and theft. Aunt Elaine spoke up, her voice small but firm. Richard, how could you do this to your own daughter? Her father had no answer. The confident, domineering man who had belittled her achievements and justified his favoritism for decades now stood silent, his deception laid bare for all to see. The little dynasty he had built on control and entitlement had crumbled in a single evening. As Detective Ramirez escorted her parents and Leo from the private dining room, a heavy silence fell over those who remained. The air was thick with confusion, guilt, and an unspoken sadness. The family drama had concluded, and now the audience was left to grapple with the raw truth that had just been exposed. Her cousin Patricia was the first to break the silence. She walked over to Amelia, her eyes filled with tears. "Amelia, I'm so sorry. We all saw how they treated you growing up, but none of us ever said anything. We should have." One by one, other relatives came forward to express similar sentiments. Faltering apologies, awkward hugs, looks of regret. Years of silent observation had finally given way to acknowledgement. It wasn't enough to erase the past, but it was something of validation that what had happened to her was wrong, that her pain was real and deserved to be seen. Amelia just nodded, accepting their words, not with triumph, but with a deep, weary sense of finality. When everyone had gone, and only Amelia, Chloe, David, and Mr. Harrison remained, she finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of the evening. "It's really over, isn't it?" She asked the question, seeming more for herself than for anyone else. "The legal process is just beginning," Mr. Harrison cautioned gently. "But yes, in many ways this chapter is closing. Your grandmother would have been very proud of how you handled yourself tonight." The weeks following the confrontation were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and emotional turmoil. Detective Ramirez moved quickly with the investigation, building a case the district attorney's office called Ironclad, thanks to the clear video and documentary evidence. Initially, her father hired an expensive criminal defense attorney using the last of the money from the house sale. His defense strategy crumbled when the lawyer reviewed the evidence and advised him to seek a plea bargain. The forged documents, the video footage, and the testimony from the Millers and the real estate agent left no room for denial. 3 weeks after this dinner of judgment, her father accepted a deal. He would receive 2 years of probation for fraud and forgery, be required to pay significant restitution, and perform 500 hours of community service. Her mother, who had physically forged the signature, received similar terms with slightly fewer community service hours. Leo, while not directly involved in the forgery, was charged with conspiracy and receiving stolen property. He received a year of probation and was ordered to pay back the full cost of his Bora Bora vacation. In parallel, the legal process to reclaim Amelia's house moved forward. Mr. Harrison worked tirelessly with the title company and the Millers to nullify the fraudulent sale. The Millers, though disappointed, were incredibly understanding and cooperative. They were fully compensated for their expenses. 4 months after her return from Tokyo, Amelia finally regained legal possession of her home. Walking through the front door for the first time since the day of her betrayal, she was overwhelmed by how different it felt. The physical space was largely unchanged, but the emotional landscape was permanently altered. This house, once her sanctuary, now carried the heavy weight of her family's betrayal. The financial fallout for her parents and Leo was immediate and severe. The restitution payments ate up their savings. The legal fees drained what was left from the house sale. Her parents were forced to put their own home on the market, downsizing to a small apartment in a less affluent neighborhood. Leo's fall was perhaps the most dramatic. Ordered to repay $150,000, he found himself facing a reality he had never been prepared for. His credit cards were maxed out. His spotty work history made finding a decent job difficult. He was forced to sell his designer clothes, his electronics, and finally his sports car. When even that wasn't enough, he took a job at a local car wash, working long hours for minimum wage plus tips. The irony of him washing the same kind of luxury cars his parents had bought with Amelia's money was not lost on anyone. 6 months after the confrontation, Amelia began the process of cleansing her house. It was more than just cleaning, it was a reclamation. She hired a team to repaint every room, replace the hardwood floors in the areas her family had trafficked most, and redesigned the garden with new plants that held no connection to the past. Chloe helped her smudge the house with sage, a cleansing ritual her best friend insisted would clear out the negative energy. While Amelia was skeptical of the metaphysical aspects, the symbolic act of purification was deeply meaningful. Room by room, they moved through the house, the fragrant smoke curling, declaring it reclaimed and renewed. As the physical transformation progressed, Amelia felt an internal shift. The house was slowly becoming hers again, not just legally but emotionally. The ghosts of the betrayal began to recede. Not gone entirely, but their power to disrupt her peace was diminished. She was reclaiming more than a building of brick and mortar. She was reclaiming her sense of security, her autonomy, and her right to live in a space untainted by deception. While Amelia was rebuilding her life and her space, her family was dealing with the collapse of the world they had built. The reverberations from the dinner of judgment spread throughout their extended family and small community, not through malicious gossip, but through the cold, hard facts of the legal proceedings and the visible changes in their living situation. The reputation her father had carefully cultivated for years as a successful business consultant and family man evaporated. News of the fraud, though not published in the papers, traveled through whispers. His consulting clients, uncomfortable with his criminal conviction, quietly sought services elsewhere. Old friends became distant. Invitations to social events dried up. About 6 months after the confrontation, Amelia received a series of texts from her mother. They started as weak apologies describing their regret and the hardships they were facing. "I never meant to hurt you," one message read. "We just thought you would understand. It was for family." Amelia read the words, but felt nothing but emptiness. The apology was too little too late, and seemed to spring from desperation rather than true remorse. She didn't respond. A week later, another message arrived. This one was more direct. Her mother asked if they could meet to discuss restoring their inheritance. The true motive behind the apologies became clear. It was about the money, not about reconciliation. Amelia forwarded the message to Mr. Harrison, who advised her not to engage. Their inheritance was permanently terminated by the terms of the trust, he explained. No amount of negotiation or reconciliation can change that. They are attempting emotional manipulation to recoup financial losses. Texts from her father followed. They alternated between attempts at justification and expressions of hardship. "You have no idea what we've been through," he wrote. "Leo is suffering. Is that what you wanted?" The words no longer had the power to wound her. They were just the empty words of a man who refused to take responsibility for his actions. She blocked both of their numbers. That door was closed. During all of this, Amelia had begun another healing journey, an internal one. She started working with a therapist who specialized in family trauma. Dr. Miller, a wise and empathetic woman, helped her navigate the complex and often conflicting emotions. "What you are experiencing is a form of complicated grief," she explained during one session. "You are mourning the loss of the family you should have had, while also processing the betrayal of the family you actually had." This framework helped Amelia make sense of her seemingly contradictory reactions, the sudden flashes of rage during mundane activities, the unexpected tears while doing something as simple as grocery shopping, and the sense of relief that sometimes felt like guilt. Dr. Miller helped her see that the favoritism she had endured throughout her childhood was not her fault. It was not a reflection of her worth, but of her parents' shortcomings. The sale of the house was not an isolated incident, but the final, most extreme act in a lifelong pattern of manipulation and disregard. When she felt emotionally ready nearly a year after the confrontation, Amelia officially moved back into her house. Chloe and David threw her a small housewarming party, but this time the guest list was entirely different. It was her chosen family, the friends, who had stood by her, who had proven their love and support came without conditions. They filled the house with laughter, stories, and genuine warmth. As Amelia stood in her newly replanted garden, under the soft glow of string lights looking at her beloved friends, she realized a profound truth. The biggest theft her family had attempted wasn't the house. It was her sense of self-worth. By treating her years of hard work as something they could casually appropriate, they had tried to reinforce a lifelong message that her accomplishments were less valuable than Leo's needs. By refusing to accept their actions by fighting for justice, instead of surrendering to their narrative, she had reclaimed more than property. She had asserted her intrinsic value and her right to be treated with respect. This her grandmother would have considered the true victory more important than any financial or legal outcome. The house, once a symbol of achievement, then a site of betrayal, had now transformed again. It was a testament to resilience. The messages from the past might have tried to pull her back, but she had built a present too strong to be moved. 2 years had passed since that fateful day when Amelia returned from Tokyo to find her home stolen. Her life had transformed in ways she could never have anticipated. The painful journey had led to unexpected growth and profound discoveries about the nature of family trust and personal strength. Her career had soared following the successful presentations in Tokyo. The clients she had secured on that trip became long-term partners, elevating her status within the company. 6 months after the confrontation with her family, she was promoted to Senior Director of International Marketing, a position that came with a significant salary increase and greater creative control over campaigns. The professional success was gratifying, but the more meaningful transformations occurred in her personal life. She had cultivated a circle of friends who showed her what genuine support looked like. Chloe remained her closest confidant. David stayed in touch, their shared family history, creating a bond that transcended the rifts elsewhere in the family tree. She also formed new friendships through a support group for adults dealing with family estrangement. They celebrated holidays together, creating new traditions to replace the ones that were lost. Her relationship with her parents and Leo remained severed. Occasionally, news would filter back to her through David or other relatives. Her parents had indeed followed Leo to Arizona, where he had found work in resort management, an irony that he was now serving the same kind of clientele he had once been on his stolen vacation. They lived in adjacent apartment complexes, their financial circumstances still constrained by the consequences of their actions. Sometimes in quiet moments, Amelia felt a pang of sadness for what could have been if they had been capable of genuine love and respect. But those moments grew fewer as she built a life filled with people who valued her for who she was, not for what she could provide. And then she met Michael. Through volunteer work at a nonprofit supporting underprivileged youth, Amelia met Michael, a landscape architect who was also donating his time. He had a quiet strength, a genuine kindness, and a smile that made his eyes crinkle. Their relationship developed slowly, built on a foundation of deep conversation and mutual respect. Unlike in previous relationships, where she had hidden parts of her family history out of shame, she shared her full story with Michael early on. He listened without judgment, empathy clear on his face. "Your grandmother was a wise woman," he remarked after hearing about the trust and its clauses. "She saw what was coming and made sure you would be protected." Michael understood boundaries and respect in a way that made her feel safe. He had his own complicated family history and recognized the courage it took to prioritize one's mental health over traditional family obligations. Her house, now cleansed and renewed, became a gathering place for her chosen family. Monthly dinner parties filled the dining room with laughter. The garden, now lush with plants chosen for their resilience and beauty, hosted summer barbecues and autumn celebrations. It was in that garden one Sunday afternoon that Michael helped her plant a new magnolia tree right in the spot where her grandmother's old rose bush had once stood. As they worked the soil together around the base of the tree, their hands touched and a quiet but powerful connection passed between them. The house was no longer a place haunted by betrayal. It had become a vibrant living space, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Every room now held new memories that overshadowed the old ones. Every space had been reclaimed through deliberate acts of creation and connection. One evening, sitting on the porch with Michael watching the fireflies light up the dusk, Amelia opened her grandmother's journal, a treasure she had discovered among her papers while working with Mr. Harrison. Her grandmother's entry from 30 years prior seemed written for this very moment. "Love never demands the diminishing of the self. True family will lift you higher. See your light and help it shine brighter. Those who wish to dim your light to make their own seem special are not acting from love no matter what they claim. Remember Amy. You always have the right to step out of the shadows and into the sun. Michael read over her shoulder. He gave her hand a gentle squeeze. Your grandmother was incredible, he said. Yes, she was, Amelia replied, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek, not a tear of sadness, but of gratitude. She left me more than a house. She left me a map. And for the first time in a long time, the future looked not like something that needed to be defended, but like a wide-open space to be explored with a partner by her side in a garden of her own remaking. 5 years after her return from Tokyo, the house at 12 Oak Street had fully shed its painful past. It was no longer a monument to betrayal or a defensive fortress. It was simply home, a place filled with light laughter and love. Amelia and Michael were married in that very garden under the magnolia tree that was now tall and bloomed spectacularly each spring. The ceremony was small and intimate, attended only by their chosen family. Chloe was the maid of honor, and David walked her down the petal-strewn aisle. Mr. Harrison, a benevolent smile on his face, sat in the front row. In her home office, the same room that had once been violated and ransacked, Amelia had established a small foundation in her grandmother's name. The Eleanor Collins Trust for Young Achievers provided scholarships and mentorship to young people who, like her, were building their futures without family support. A portion of the money from her grandmother's trust, the part that would have gone to her parents and brother, was now being used to light the way for others. It was a legacy reborn, turning pain into purpose. Through the foundation, Amelia met and inspired many young people. She shared her story not as a tragedy, but as a lesson in resilience and the importance of defining one's own worth. Occasionally, Amelia would think of her biological family. Their life in Arizona, from what she heard, continued in a cycle of financial struggle and quiet regret. They never truly took responsibility, blaming circumstances and her unforgiving nature. The wall between them and her was no longer built of anger, but of a sad acceptance that some bridges simply cannot be rebuilt, especially when their foundations were destroyed by deceit. One afternoon, while cleaning out the attic, Amelia stumbled upon an old box filled with childhood photos. She sat amidst the dusty memories, looking at the face of her younger self, a girl always striving to be loved, to be seen. She saw pictures of Leo, the pampered younger brother, and her parents, who smiled for the camera, but failed to see the gem they had. Instead of pain, she felt only a distant compassion. She had forgiven them not because they deserved it, but because she deserved peace. Forgiveness didn't mean reconciliation or forgetting. It meant releasing herself from the burden of resentment, allowing the scars to become part of the story instead of open wounds. Michael came up to the attic carrying 2 cups of tea. He sat down beside her, looking at the photos. "What are you thinking?" he asked softly. Amelia leaned her head on his shoulder. "I'm thinking about how family can take many forms, and sometimes it's not the one we're born into, but the one we choose to walk with. The people who see our light and want to dance in it, not put it out." She looked out the attic window down into the garden where their young daughter Eleanor, named for her great-grandmother, was chasing butterflies. The sound of her pure, joyful laughter floated on the air. Grandma Eleanor had left her a financial inheritance, but her true legacy was far greater. It was the wisdom to recognize true family and the courage to create it where it did not naturally exist. It was the lesson that the greatest strength lies not in never falling, but in always rising stronger, wiser, and more capable of profound love. The house her family had tried to steal had become more truly hers than it ever could have been otherwise. The life they had tried to shrink had expanded beyond what she could have imagined. The strength they had underestimated had, just as her grandmother predicted, become her greatest asset. As the sun set over the quiet neighborhood, casting a golden glow over the house and garden, Amelia felt a deep sense of peace. Her story was not one of vengeance, but of restoration. It was proof that from the most painful of fragments, one could build something beautiful, true, and enduring. And that was the legacy of light she would pass on to the next generation, a legacy cultivated not by blood, but by choice, respect, and a love that never demanded the sacrifice of the self.